in the early going, the NT wife, who is not the wife yet, meets this guy. He's a little quirky and naive and maybe even shy and forgetful. And she finds some of these traits a little cute in the beginning. And she maybe at an unconscious level think, well, this guy kind of needs me to take. He seems a little helpless. And she, being the motherly person that you are or were going to be, you thought, well, this is kind of cute. You may or may not resonate with that, but I see that a lot. And also in the early going, if you don't know he has ASD, and maybe he doesn't even know it. And by the way, when I say ASD, I'm saying high functioning autism, Asperger's syndrome, ASD level 1, whatever we're calling it now. UK still calls it Asperger's. Most of the rest of the world calls it ASD level 1. Level 2 being needs moderate support. Level 3 being needs major support. ASD level 3 is full-blown autistic disorder. So we're talking ASD level 1 here. And so you may not have known that he had it, and he may not have even known that he had it, but he probably knew that he had some odd mannerisms, and he probably camouflaged very well in the early going because he was uncomfortable with you still. But then when he got comfortable, he kind of let down his guard and didn't mind just being his true self. And then you got to see the full meal deal, and you got to see some of the behaviors that may have been troubling to you way back in the day, in the early going even. And so in the early part of the relationship, in the early going also, he camouflages some of his behavior that he's already known from childhood was kind of problematic. And so he's wanting to present very well. And so he probably passed as a fairly typical person in the very beginning. But like I say, the more comfortable he got with you, the more he let down his camouflaging behavior, and the more you saw the true person coming out. In the very beginning, you were his special interest. As you probably have researched, they have one, maybe two, but usually just one special interest that they spend most of their time with. And it usually doesn't have anything to do with people. It's usually a task. That they're more into objects and things and tasks and not so much into social stuff. And so, but in the very beginning, you were his special interest. But as the relationship grew, there were more and more responsibilities. I'm just going to make examples up. Maybe you wanted him to go see your parents, and he's not very social. He probably didn't like that. Then there was the pressure to get married, and he may have gone along with that, but felt a lot of internal anxiety that didn't reveal. And then the kids come along. So long story short, the more the relationship progresses, the more messy it got for him, the more complex it got for him. And so with this additional complexity over the years, this raised his anxiety significantly. And you may have noticed that as the years rolled by in the marriage, he got more and more distant from you and more connected to his special interest, which was his anxiety reduction strategy. And so now here we sit today, and you guys are going, I'm not important to him. His hobby is more important than I am. I can't get him to connect. Doesn't talk about feelings. Whenever we try to discuss a problem, he downloads it as criticism and feels like he's being attacked and yada, yada, yada. And so here we are today with you guys, and I'm not complaining, who wouldn't perceive that as rejection. But what's really going on in most of these cases where you're downloading it as rejection and withdrawal from the relationship is really has more to do with his anxiety reduction strategy. So there's several traits. I'm going to mention some traits that get in the way of the relationship that cause a problem. With people on the autism spectrum, they turn their emotions way down, not off, but way down. And a lot of NT wives say, well, he doesn't have any empathy. No, he has empathy, but he lacks displayed empathy. He has it somewhere in there, he just doesn't reveal it. And they also have what I call selective empathy. They can be highly empathic in certain situations, And it appears like they have no empathy in other situations. And I even have experienced numerous times, although you may be astonished with this, where he had so much empathy that it was so painful and stressful to feel that he shut it off. That's usually a childhood issue thing where he did have empathy, but his empathic ability was so strong that it was just too painful to have empathy, and he literally had to manually shut it off, so to speak. So they turn their emotions way down, and this comes from many years of, honestly, emotions getting in the way of their logical way of thinking. So it's not that they don't have room for emotions, they just don't see any need for emotions in their mind. Emotions, as far as they're concerned, get in the way of completing tasks. In fact, you could even think their motto might be remove the emotions and accomplish the task more efficiently. They're very task-oriented. And so ASD is a developmental disorder. And developmentally, their socially emotional brain is stunted. So their social skills are lacking, their displayed empathy is exceedingly low. But honestly, it's even a little more problematic than that because their logical brain is over-functioning. And a highly logical brain is an overthinking brain. It gets stuck on details. He gets hooked into a thought. He can't see the big picture. He can't put the details together. Like if he's making plans that involve several steps, he'll get stuck on one step and he has a hard time moving into the rest of the steps. And so he ends up procrastinating a lot because he's on the OCD side. That comes with the territory. Very perfectionistic. If he doesn't get all his ducks in a row for step one, he's not moving on to step two. So we have two problems here. We have a low social emotional brain that's stunted. So emotionally, socially, you may have a 35-year-old, 45-year-old husband, for example. Chronologically, socially, and emotionally, he's more like a 14-year-old. And then you have this overly logical brain that's getting in the way of seeing the big picture. And now we contrast that with you with this very highly intelligent socially emotional brain. So now you're high in social emotional intelligence, he's low. So you can kind of see why there is, I mean, how could you not have problems in that case? You can imagine. So the other thing that goes on with people with ASD is they have this mind blindness stuff, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. So if I have mind blindness, I have a hard time guessing what is in the mind of my wife. I have a hard time knowing what she might be thinking, what she might be feeling based on what she's thinking, why she's behaving a certain way based on how she's feeling, what her motives are. I don't understand her opinions. And so I'm drawing blanks trying to figure her out. She's very complex and confusing and a mystery to me. And so with this mind blindness issue, I have to fill in the blanks with something. But unfortunately, with mind blindness, since I'm not really sure what's going on with the other person, I tend to fill in that blank with my own poor assessment, which almost always has a negative spin. So he is not only misinterpreting your behavior in most cases and your feelings and your opinions and your perspective. He's not only misinterpreting that, he's in many cases putting a negative spin on it. He's going to have a hard time understanding and predicting the consequences of his behavior. And since he is highly logical and low in the emotional business, he's going to view you as overly emotional, illogical, irrational, and so on. So they have hard time talking about, I'm sure you've run into this, talking about the relationship problems because they view that as an attack. They have a hard time listening to negative emotions expressed by you because whenever they hear a difference of opinion or an attempt to explain a different perspective about a situation, they view that as conflict and criticism. And also, as you probably have surmised, routines are paramount, with this mind blindness business, since I'm not really sure what other people might be thinking, why they're feeling certain ways, why they're behaving certain ways, my life is highly unpredictable in the social sense. And since I have all this unpredictability, what I have to do to keep my stress as low as possible so I don't lose my mind is I have to have as much routine and structure as possible. And I hate change. If this is the case with me, if I have mind blindness, I'm going to hate change because it's a surprise and I hate surprises. So routines are paramount. They find great difficulty in changes in their routine. They don't like surprises. And the last thing, as far as traits that get in the way of the relationship is, and I mentioned this earlier, tasks. They're very task oriented. So their motto could be tasks first, relationships second. So you can see when you take all that into combination as a combined figure, everything that I just said, it shouldn't be any surprise to you why there is such a disconnect. And to make matters even worse, your method, most of you out of well-intentioned heart in your effort to try to get him to reconnect because you care about the relationship. You don't want it to go down the toilet. So you've worked very hard to try to get him to wake up and to be a part of the family, to be a team player. But almost in all cases, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say in all cases, to date, in my experience, her message gets lost because her approach causes anxiety in him. Her message gets lost because her approach has raised his anxiety and he either melts down or shuts down or pretends like he's listening, but he's off in his fantasy world and didn't ever hear a damn thing. It didn't go in one ear and out the other. It didn't even go in the one ear. So if you have found that, well, I can't even talk to him about anything. I could make a neutral comment and he feels attacked, then he has assigned you as a major source of stress for him. In fact, in too many cases, and it's sad to say, she has become his number one source of anxiety. And then you can imagine what happens then with you. Now you have no emotional reciprocity. You don't feel like you're appreciated at all. You may even, if he tends to be more meltdownish than shutdownish, you've probably been verbally abused. And some women even have been traumatized, quite honestly.